My mistake. The roads were dangerous. Storm water coated the asphalt, deep puddles that obscured the lane markings and rose in a spray under my car tyres. Heavy raindrops on the windscreen conspired with fog from my own breath to obscure my vision. The time was so late that it was practically early, so there were blessed few other cars on the road. This was a bad night to be driving. This was the sort of night where mistakes would be made, and people died. I arrived home in one piece, so to speak. Work had been both physically and mentally exhausting, and the drive home had used up the last of my concentration. I waited in the car for a moment, hoping in vain that the storm would let up briefly enough for my sprint to my front door, thoughts of the day crowding my exhausted brain. Faces of patients and their frightened or grieving families drifted through my mind. Crying, screaming, or sometimes completely blank. The worst ones were the faces full of desperate hope that my team and I might find a solution that I knew just didn't exist. The storm refused to relent, and I resigned myself to getting wet. Gathering my belongings, I dashed out of the car, but only ran a few steps before running out of energy and walking the rest of the path. I was already soaked. The extra few seconds would make little difference. The yard was a mess. I hadn't weeded in months, and badly needed to get someone to mow the tiny lawn, but it was not my priority at the time. The dead heads of the roses shed brown petals under the raindrops, and thorn branches scraped the windows. My home was cold. I hadn't bothered to leave the heater on that morning. It seemed a waste to heat the whole place when nobody was in it. I didn't bother to turn it on now either, knowing I'd be in bed soon. There was precious little time for me to sleep before tomorrow's shift at the hospital. I found my way carefully to the kitchen, switching on the solitary light I needed to find my way around. Dinner was destined to be a frozen microwave meal for one. It wasn't fancy. Truthfully, they didn't taste very good, but they claimed to be healthy, and it was one less thing my busy mind needed to think about. They tasted a little better if heated in the oven, but I had neither the patience nor the motivation for that. The hum of the microwave did little to warm my thoughts. There was always so much I needed to do, and so much I never quite managed to get done. All those tasks would have to wait though. I just needed to eat, sleep, and go back to work tomorrow. Life was always that way. The electronic ding jolted me from my thoughts. The plastic tray of the so-called honey soy chicken was hot to touch. Steam drifted upwards from the open packet. I opened a kitchen drawer to gather cutlery, a single knife and fork. All my others were waiting patiently in the sink to be cleaned. Sudden movement from the couch demanded my attention. Nothing should be moving in my house except me. "Good evening," said a man in a suit sitting far too casually on my couch. My shoulders tensed and my fists clenched. "I highly doubt that," I grumbled. A dozen questions raced through my mind, but it didn't occur to me to be frightened. I was only angry, insulted even, that someone had the nerve to bother me here, especially after the day I'd had. "How did you get in here?" I demanded. He stood up, rolling his shoulders and fixing his tie before walking towards me in the kitchen. I didn't know how long he'd been waiting, only that his suit was completely dry, while I was still soaked from my sprint through the storm. "Is that really your most important question?" he mused, head tilting to one side as he advanced. I racked my brain, trying to recall if he was someone I recognized. It was no use. I'd seen so many people today, so many people every day, that I could barely keep track of who was who. I didn't know what I must have done to anger someone so much that they break into my home. He must have come in the back door. I hadn't seen any signs of an intruder at the front. "No, I suppose not," I conceded, eyes fixed upon him. "The more important question is, how do I make you leave?" He paused and smiled. This was not reassuring in any way. He wasn't unpleasant to look at, but in my home, at this time of night, I couldn't shake a profound sense of wrongness. But I was still not afraid. "Now where's the fun in answering that?" He practically purred. The voice was deep and oddly familiar, though I couldn't quite place it. "Do you always answer every question with a question?" I snapped. I had no patience or time for a game of cat and mouse in my own house tonight. His reply was brief. "No." He smiled menacingly, gesturing to the space between us as he advanced. "Since we're here, I thought we'd take the opportunity to understand each other, get to know each other." I tensed, flushed with rage, but didn't move from beside the kitchen bench. "What do you want exactly?" I demanded curtly. He feigned innocence. "Just to talk." "There's a telephone," I said. I reached slowly into the kitchen drawer, taking care to keep my eyes fixed on his. He never blinked. He laughed, a deep, insincere chuckle that echoed through my house and head. "That would be inadequate. We need to do more than talk. We need to understand each other. I want to help you. All you need to do is invite me in." He stroked his tie absent-mindedly. "Why would I do that? You found your way in here without an invitation." Lightning flashed in the window, revealing the rest of the room for the briefest moment. In that flash, his smile flickered to a scowl. A creeping, nagging pain settled around my head like a band. I badly needed to rest. The last thing I needed was whatever this was. He paused in his advance. Pale hands gestured around my home, cold and empty as it was. I was suddenly embarrassed by my own disorganization. There were dishes in the sink, mostly cutlery, to be fair, that had been waiting for days. A pile of unopened and unattended mail lay on my little dining table. Drying racks, half full of laundry, filled the open space of the lounge. Lately, I hadn't been bothering to put my clothes away. I just washed what I needed and wore it straight off the rack. "You've been drowning in life, my dear," he said, gesturing to one housekeeping failure after another. "You were better than this. You are better than this. I understand life can get difficult, but I can make everything easy again." I silently scolded myself for letting my home get into such a state. He was at least partly right. I had let this state continue far too long. My home was in no condition to host a guest. "Not a guest," I reminded myself. "An intruder." "Work gets us all down at times," he continued. "But you bear those burdens more than most. They don't leave you, do they? You give so much of yourself that you don't have anything left to be yourself. Always on the edge, always thinking. Decisions with the stakes so high, and so much simply unnecessary uncertainty." He stopped scrutinizing the room and slowly stepped towards me again, his back straight and arms open. "I can make everything so very easy. No fear, no worries, no doubts, no difficult decisions." He smiled in such a way that he probably thought was warmly, but to me with my aching head only served to make me uneasy. "Just certainty," he offered. I sneered despite myself. "There's exactly one certainty in life," I said. He scowled, dropping the act for a moment. "And that is?" he said with a jerk of his head to one side. "Not you." The smile returned, collected, calm, predatory. He was only one step away now. I tensed but did not move. "How curious," he mused, his dark eyes searching my face for what though I'm not sure. "You do seem to lack a certain—" He hesitated, hands drifting through the small space between us as though literally clutching at words. "A certain self-preservation instinct." "And why is that so curious?" His smile widened, bearing more teeth than he probably intended to. Because everyone else is wise enough to be afraid by now. I smiled this time, not the warm, understanding smile I wore most of the day at work, but the cold, angry smile I grew when I'd run out of patience. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I mocked, "but it's rather difficult to be afraid of you when you're standing here in such a well-fitting suit, and I'm standing here with a very sturdy kitchen knife and the knowledge of where every single vein runs in your body." He raised one eyebrow in response. "Now I believe you were leaving," I continued. His expression went blank and he straightened his shoulders. "No," he said softly, the corners of his lips twitching upwards in the faintest hint of a grin. "I'm not leaving, and I doubt very much that you could shed a single drop of my blood, even if you had the will to do so, good doctor." He chuckled to himself, bringing one hand to his lips to conceal a smirk. "Besides, your trusty blade appears to be inaccessible at present." I frowned and stole a glance down at my hand. The knife under my palm was visible, but looked like 3 different versions of itself, all overlaid one on top of the other. They were all the same knife, but all wrong somehow. Too blue, too red, or devoid of colour at all. And my hand passed through all of them. Now I was worried. "Give it back," I said. He shook his head. "Not yet." He practically purred. The man turned away from me and stepped towards my little dining table. It was really only big enough for 2, but cluttered with assorted mail and documents that I just hadn't gotten around to dealing with. With one casual gesture, the clutter glided off the table and thumped onto the floor, and a chair slid out for me. "Come, you mustn't let your dinner get cold on my behalf," he said, standing behind the other chair. I stepped out of the kitchen, but hesitated before approaching the table. "I'm not really hungry," I said softly. That was true. My headache was getting much worse, and I swore I could hear a high-pitched ringing. He chuckled again, the sound cutting through the ringing in my ears. "Of course not. Your current dinner is quite pathetic. You deserve something much better than that." He stroked his chin in contemplation. "Perhaps you would allow me to tempt you with something more worthy." He gestured across the empty dining table like a magician. As I blinked, a meal appeared, welcoming and extravagant. A pair of steaming hot steaks surrounded by vegetables and 2 glasses of red wine. No, not quite red wine. The colour was off. It was grey, I realised. I'd only mistaken it for red. All the food was greyer than it should have been, as was the man himself now I bothered to notice. It was like looking through a migraine aura where all the colours of the world were different in one eye, and I couldn't match them up. "Sit," he said, gesturing with the glass of wine. I'd often wondered if demons were real, in an abstract or metaphorical sense. Medicine tended to expose you to the murky depths of human nature, and I had encouraged more than my fair share of people I would have described as having broken souls. Many patients had their own demons. Some knew them better than others. I'd often wondered idly about what it was that would tempt someone to fall, to lose their resolve. I used to wonder what would tempt me. It certainly wasn't going to be dinner. "I'm vegetarian," I quipped. He replaced the wine glass on the table. "Sure you are, my dear. That's why it's chicken in that pathetic microwave meal beside you," he sneered. He stared up at me, intense eyes shadowed by a lock of black hair. "Your attempt is adorable, but ill-advised. Don't lie to me, and I won't lie to you," he warned. He stood up straight again, rolling his shoulders. For such a well-fitting suit, it didn't seem to be very comfortable. "I promise," he added. "I don't believe you," I replied. The corners of his eyes crinkled with amusement. "Your belief is irrelevant." He gestured again to the waiting chair. He was easier on the eyes now in a quite literal sense. His features were smoother, almost stylized, but still greyer than they should have been, even in the dim light from the kitchen. "What are you?" I wondered. "What do you hope I am?" he crooned through a charming smile. "Are you going to answer every question with a question again?" I quipped. My headache was getting difficult to bear. Could I risk turning my back to take some painkillers? Was there anything I could do to worsen the danger I was probably in? "No," he said simply. I stayed silent. I didn't know what game was going on, but doing what this guest, intruder, wanted me to do was unlikely to be for my advantage. After a few moments, he wrapped his fingers against the back of his chair and gestured again to mine. I still declined to sit. The room, previously so chilly, felt warmer now, the air heavy with humidity. The storm still raged outside, and my head pounded distractedly, but I refused to move. I didn't know how to play his game, but I suspected if I played it at all, then I would lose. Besides, I was really in no mood to even entertain the concept. I had work tomorrow and needed to sleep. A growl escaped from the man in the suit. For a moment I thought I was seeing double. Two echoes of the man stood in the same place, one calm and collected, the other roaring with rage. It lasted only a few seconds, enough to make me question my own sanity again. "Is this really what you want?" he snarled, turning to gesture around the room. "Is this the life you really want to have? Alone, overworked, and underappreciated?" He stepped towards me, glowering at everything. He seemed bigger, and once again I thought I could see two or maybe three versions of the same man in the same place, but not quite identical. It was hard to focus on, like my kitchen knife had been. "You could be so much more," he roared, pointing at me with one accusatory finger. "You're wasting, withering away here in the shadows. You, the good doctor, are capable of much greater things. You deserve greater things." He calmed a little, the three visions of him coalescing back into one, still tremoring with rage. "You could achieve so much more, be so much more, if you'd only dare to ask," he continued, stepping towards me again. "I can help you get it, to have anything you desire." Lightning flashed through the window, exaggerating his features for the briefest of moments. I suddenly felt like having a table between us was a wise idea. I stepped towards the waiting chair and immediately his posture changed. He no longer loomed in the room. Instead of gesturing around, he calmly clasped his hands behind his back. He waited with new patience as I sat warily in the chair. I hesitated, but he didn't move. He only stared. The calm facade betrayed nothing. I pulled in my chair and placed my hands on the table. "That's a pretty strange offer from a home invader," I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I looked. Why was it so hard to concentrate? He sat down gracefully in the other chair, smiling smugly. "I would prefer the term surprise guest, if you don't mind." He practically purred. He folded his hands in front of himself, resting his elbows on the table. The room felt abruptly cold again. I was unsure how it had ever felt warm. "What do you want?" I asked. Whatever game he was playing, I was so sick and tired of it. I was so unbelievably tired, yet underneath it all still angry that this person had dared come into my house. "You already asked me that," he replied, one eyebrow lifting. His smug smile was getting irritating. "And you lied," I said. "I did not," he insisted, leaning back in his chair and drawing a cross over his heart with one finger. "I promise." Unsure what to say, I managed only an angry glare. The wind howled outside, and the rain never ceased. A real killer storm. The offered meal of steak had vanished from the table. He sighed, reaching across the table for my hand. "I want to help you, to know you." I drew back quickly. I didn't know what would happen if he touched me. I wasn't even sure whether he could, like I had been unable to touch my kitchen knife. "I want you to leave so I can sleep," I said, keeping my hands out of reach. His face flickered, scowling as my hands had been pulled away. The scowl was suddenly replaced by another smile, a new smile. This one was softer. For a moment, I almost mistook it for kindness, before recognizing it. It was a smile of pity. "It's unlikely you're going to get any sleep tonight, my dear," he said. "Look around. Be a realist." He placed one hand flat against the table in front of him again and gestured around my home with the other. "Life is overrunning you, and you simply haven't been able to keep up. There's just so much to do, too much to think about. Trust me, I understand." He made an attempt at a warm smile and offered a hand, palm up. I stared at it. There was not a single thing about this situation that I could trust. "I can fix this," he continued. "I can help you get back on your feet, if that's what you want." "What's the catch?" I asked coldly, making no move for the outstretched hand and refusing to break eye contact. "The catch?" he asked innocently, tilting his head to one side. "If I'm being offered a deal by the devil," I explained tiredly, though I didn't think I should have needed to, "I need to know what's the catch." The offered hand closed into a fist and withdrew. "Is that what you think I am?" he asked smoothly, straightening his suit jacket once again. "Am I right?" I asked. "Would it excite you if you are?" he said softly, leaning back with a smirk to comb his fingers through his black hair. "Are we seriously back on the endless cycle of questions again?" I snapped. He paused, sitting up straight once more. "No." I waited. I really had nothing more to say in this situation, and simply feeling too drained to come up with anything clever. If he was setting some kind of trap, then I figured the least he could do was throw me some bait. "Very well," he said at last. "No catch. Just stay, talk. Simply get to know each other, come to understand each other." The hairs on the back of my neck rose. I began to really wish I'd turned on more lights when I'd come home. "Why would you want to get to know me?" The smile shifted from pity to interest. His focus was intense and disconcerting. "That's not the most important question," he smirked. "The better question is, what can you learn from me, if I am what you think I am?" They say curiosity is a more powerful motivator than fear. They're not wrong. "Honestly?" I wondered. "Always," he said, nodding slowly. Part of me had to admit the smile was charming. Another part of me knew from experience that anyone could be charming when they wanted something. "You'll answer every question with the truth?" I asked again. "Yes," he replied, excitement rising in his voice. "Everything you ever wondered, and my dear, I know you've wondered." He began to list things on his fingers. "Life, death, souls, anything you've ever wondered about, I will answer with the truth This, at least, was tempting. I had wondered too often about factors beyond my control. Were souls real? What happened after death? Could we find peace after it? Is there justice in the afterlife? So much I wanted to know for the sake of my patients past and present. Yet I hesitated still. I knew from experience that knowledge brought power, and while I wouldn't give away all the knowledge I'd spent years studying to acquire, it also changed your view of the world. It tainted you. Knowledge was truly a double-edged sword. And this offer, this was knowledge that no human was supposed to have. Not on this side of death in any case. But it was so tempting. I stammered. I'm afraid I must decline. I knew in my heart that I couldn't allow forbidden knowledge to change the way I practiced medicine. I might get to know what happens after we die, but none of my patients were keen to find out for themselves if I could help it. He froze in place, almost. His visage flickered, but I could only catch a glimpse of the other emotions he struggled to keep under control. They weren't good. What? He snarled. I have to decline, I said again, quickly this time. I mustn't learn those things. I waited for a reaction, a knot forming in my stomach and expecting the worst. He only said one word. Why? I took a deep breath and chose my words carefully. I can't ethically allow your answers to change my actions. It's still my job to save lives, no matter what may or may not be waiting for those souls if I fail. I have to go to work tomorrow and try just as hard as I did today. Now I need to sleep. Perhaps we can talk some other time. He slammed his hands down onto the table. I jumped to my feet. My chair tumbled behind me. There is no other time, he hissed at the table. This is a one-time offer. He glared up at me, not moving. Ask anything, he urged. Ask everything. But everything is so big, I whispered, my mouth dry. I'm not supposed to know those answers. I'm going to work tomorrow and I'm going to save lives, and there's nothing you can tell me that can or should change that. Always with the work in the morning, he grumbled, staring down at the table. But what if you don't have a morning to wake up to? I thought of the storm, rain still pelting down outside. I knew it was a dangerous night to be driving. I knew there'd be terrible accidents on the road tonight. Was I already dead? I took a deep, slow breath. I could feel my panicked heart beating in my chest. I didn't think I was deceased, but it struck me as unwise to ask. I can give you everything you need, he said, looking up at me, eyes as dark as the storm outside. I can make all your struggles easy, care and comfort, removing all life's tiresome details and difficult decisions. He stood up, stepping rapidly around the little table. Even knowledge beyond mortal comprehension isn't good enough to tempt the good doctor, it seems. Slow, deliberate steps brought him closer to me, but there was nothing deliberate about his shape. Shimmering, twitching, slightly different versions all occupying the same space as he advanced, all but one screaming with rage, reaching for me. I was going to make your life easy, he said, the deep voice emanating from the version of himself not currently screaming, the one that seemed to be barely in control. But I assure you, my dear, I can also make it very difficult. I stepped backwards, unwilling to tear my gaze away. My mind raced for any idea of escape, of defense, but it was too slow even in panic. I jumped as I backed into the wall behind me. He was so close and I had nowhere to run. He reached towards me, one hand either side of my head, fingers extending like claws. His face was close enough to feel his breath, as hot as I'd imagined hell would be. His expression flickered. jolting between different versions of himself a mere breath away from me. I dared not move. I couldn't actually move. I only stared in wide-eyed fear. His eyes were dark like the space between stars. They didn't look like eyes at all, more like pits of nothingness that drew me in. He blinked. He withdrew. I dared to breathe again. "My mistake," he murmured, taking a step back, fixing his suit. Mistake? I wondered out loud before thinking. The storm still roared outside, but I noticed my headache was suddenly gone. "Yes, I should apologize," he said stiffly, as though the words were foreign to him. "It appears your soul is not here." He combed his fingers through his ruffled hair, his visage converging into a single version of himself, once more looking human. "I will take my leave." He gave a small nod and turned away, walking towards my front door. I slumped back against the wall as he left. I was relieved, but unsure what had happened, or rather what had nearly happened. A sudden burning concern ripped me as I heard the front door open. I raced to the entrance. "Wait!" I called out to the man in the dark. He hesitated by the garden gate. "You said my soul isn't here. Where is it?" He straightened, a darker silhouette in the gloomy night and pelting rain. He said something, but the sound was drowned in the roar of the storm. "Come back inside," I shouted, switching on the light. The man, or whatever he was, turned and walked back down the garden path towards me. He raised one hand to his ear. "I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that." "Then come back inside," I shouted again as the wind picked up pace. "Tell me where my soul is." He smiled on the threshold of my home. It was not a kind smile. I noticed, far too late, that he was still completely dry. A broad grin crept across his lips, and my stomach twisted with dread as he stepped back into my home. "I accept your invitation,"